The day began like any other, unremarkable in its simplicity. The morning sun filtered through my blinds, painting golden stripes across the living room wall. I had a short list of things to pick up: groceries, a few toiletries, and maybe a small treat for myself. It was a Saturday, the kind of day meant for errands that you push off all week. I wasn't in a hurry, wasn't pressed for time. I just wanted to enjoy the ease of moving through a routine that felt ordinary. I grabbed my keys, locked the door, and reminded myself to breathe in the calm of this day. For me, moments of peace are not taken for granted. Being black. In America, peace is often fragile, something that can be shattered without warning, replaced by an unease you didn't ask for. Still, I wasn't thinking about that as I slid into my car. I just wanted milk, bread, maybe a candle that smelled like lavender. The drive was short. I pulled into the parking lot of a neighborhood store I'd been to dozens of times before. Nothing about it seemed remarkable, but familiarity often disguises the potential for what's waiting. I parked in a spot near the entrance, gathered my reusable bags, and I walked inside, nodding politely at the greeter. By the door, the air inside was cool, humming with the soft buzz of fluorescent lights. A mother wrangled her children near the carts. A young couple debated over snacks in the aisle, and somewhere down the line, I heard the squeak of a mop against the tile floor. Nothing unusual. Just life unfolding in small, ordinary ways. Then I moved toward the produce section, reaching for apples first, then checking avocados, giving them the light squeeze to test for ripeness. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, I felt it. That sensation you can't quite name but know all too well. The quiet burn of eyes fixed on you. I turned slightly, catching the edge of a uniformed employee a few feet away. He wasn't stocking shelves, wasn't rearranging displays. He was simply standing there, eyes trained on me in a way that wasn't casual. I brushed it off, telling myself I was overthinking. After all, everyone glances at shoppers sometimes, and I moved to the bread aisle, scanning the shelves for my usual whole grain loaf. And yet, when I turned the corner, there he was again. Same distance, same silence, same stare. It was as if my movements had dictated his. I paused, loaf in hand, pretending to read the label, but my eyes flicked sideways. He wasn't hiding it, his gaze locked on me like I was a suspect in a crime. That hadn't even happened. The air that had once felt cool now pressed heavy on my chest. That fragile piece I had carried into the store began to splinter. The store was filled with other customers, people browsing freely, laughing and moving without a shadow. And yet I was the one tethered to suspicion. I moved again, slower this time, testing down the cereal aisle, past the bright colors of boxes promising happiness in a bowl, and again the echo of his footsteps trailed close behind. He pretended to straighten the shelf when I turned suddenly, but the performance was weak. His presence clung to me like static. It's a peculiar thing to be followed in such a way. The surface, it might look like nothing, just an employee, just doing his job. But beneath it runs a current of something much deeper, something corrosive. It says, "You don't belong here. You are dangerous until proven harmless. You are guilty until we decide otherwise." My hands trembled slightly as I picked up a box, not from fear of him, but from the weight of the humiliation. My skin was not invisible. It was a spotlight, and every step I took was illuminated under an unspoken accusation. I thought about leaving, abandoning the cart and walking straight out the door, but something in me resisted. I didn't want to give him that satisfaction, didn't want to let suspicion dictate my right to shop for bread and milk like anyone else. So I stayed, though every aisle I entered became another reminder of the cage I was being pushed into. At one point, a white woman passed me, her cart filled with wine and cheese. He didn't trail her. He didn't even glance in her direction. It was only me, only my blackness that warranted surveillance. The unfairness of it sat in my stomach like a stone, heavy and unyielding. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to remind myself that dignity doesn't vanish just because someone else refuses to see it. Still, my throat tightened with the effort of pretending to be unaffected. I wanted to ask him why. I wanted to turn and say, "Do you see me as a thief? Do you believe my skin is an alarm that rings in your head?" But I didn't, not yet. Instead, I walked toward the personal care section, grabbed what I needed, and forced myself to move slowly, as though his scrutiny hadn't altered me. But the truth is, it had. My heartbeat was louder than the hum of the lights, louder than the chatter of customers. I wasn't just shopping anymore. I was navigating an accusation that had never been spoken but screamed louder than words. Ever could. And in that moment, I knew this trip was no longer about errands. It had become something else entirely. A mirror held up to the world we live in. A reminder that even the most ordinary acts buying groceries on a Saturday can become battlegrounds when your blackness is seen as a crime in progress. I pushed the cart forward, trying to hold my head high, but inside, I was already wrestling with questions that had no easy answers. Why was I the only one shadowed? Why was dignity such a fragile possession, so easily threatened by the gaze of a stranger? And, most of all, why did a simple trip to the store have to remind me, yet again, that peace for someone like me is never as simple as it should be? I tried to focus on the shelves in front of me, to pretend that my shopping list mattered more than the presence I felt hovering nearby. Toothpaste, deodorant, a pack of razors, things I would normally toss into the cart without thought. But each item now felt like a prop in a scene I hadn't auditioned for. A scene where I was cast as the suspect. And the only script written for me was suspicion. He was still there. His reflection flickered in the small convex mirror at the end of the aisle, the kind meant for catching blind spots. But this mirror didn't catch a thief. It caught me catching him, watching me. The irony wasn't lost. I placed the toothpaste in my cart, deliberately careful, almost theatrical. My hand trembled against the plastic as I imagined what he must be writing in his mind. She lingered too long. She concealed something. She looked suspicious. The truth was I wasn't concealing anything at all except the anger that threatened to surface, sharp and unfiltered. I pushed forward. Down the cleaning supplies aisle, past the bright yellows and blues of detergents. He followed. My cart squeaked at the turn, and so did his shoes on the polished floor. Every sound was louder now, magnified by the silence between us. I wasn't alone in the store. Shoppers passed, oblivious, lost in their own small decisions. A young man compared two different cereals. A grandmother inspected a can of soup. To them, it was just another Saturday. They couldn't feel the weight pressing against my spine. They couldn't hear the unspoken accusation breathing down my neck. Part of me wanted to say something, to break the silence with a question that was really a demand. Why me? But another part of me, the part trained by years of knowing how quickly a moment can turn held back. Words, once spoken, can tilt a situation in ways you can't control. I didn't want to give him any excuse to call for backup, to escalate, to turn my dignity into a headline. So I endured. Still, every aisle felt smaller, every corner tighter. The store that had once been routine territory now felt like a cage. The aisles bars that closed around me. My mind replayed memories of other moments, other shadows. Times in malls and clothing stores, even in bookstores where suspicion had followed me like a storm cloud. It was never said outright, but it was always there, written on the faces of those who believed that blackness and criminality were synonyms. I thought of my mother. I thought of the lessons she gave me as a child, the rules every black parent knows to pass on, don't run in stores. Keep your hands visible, always get a receipt. Smile if you can, though even that won't always protect you. She gave me these instructions like a survival kit, tools for navigating a world where perception could be punishment. And here I was, grown now, still carrying her lessons like armor, still needing them. I tried to shake it off, to remind myself that I wasn't doing anything wrong, that I belonged here as much as anyone else. But belonging doesn't always shield you from being made into an outsider. At one point, I stopped. I'd placed my hands firmly on the cart handle and stood still. I wanted to test him, to see if he would stop too. He did. Not a word, not a movement toward me. Just standing there, watching. The silence was almost theatrical, as if the store itself had become a stage and he was determined to play his role until the curtain fell. I took a breath, forcing my voice to remain calm, low, controlled. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, finally turning to face him. His eyes flickered with a hint of surprise, but his posture didn't change. "Just making sure everything's all right," he said flatly, his words coated with a false professionalism. "Everything is fine," I replied. My tone was polite, though beneath it a storm brewed. Fine? What about this was fine? Having my every move tracked like prey in a field? Being reduced to a walking suspicion? Stripped of the simple right to shop without scrutiny? But I didn't let the storm spill out. Not yet. I held it, clenched tight between my teeth. Because I knew how fragile dignity could be when met with authority that assumes the worst, I turned away again, pushing the cart toward the dairy section. The cold air from the refrigerators washed over me, but it didn't cool the heat rising inside. He followed again. Always again, I reached for a carton of milk, the same brand I always bought. But in that small act, I felt the absurdity of it all, how my hand reaching into a refrigerator could be twisted into suspicion. How something so ordinary could be framed as dangerous when viewed through the lens of bias. Other shoppers laughed, chatted, compared prices. They were free. Free to be unseen, free to move through aisles without second-guessing whether their presence was an offense. I envied that freedom in that moment more than anything else. By the time I reached the frozen foods, I could feel the weight pressing down harder. It wasn't just about groceries anymore. It wasn't even just about him. It was about every door I had walked through where I was measured not by my humanity, but by my skin. Every sideways glance, every clutching purse, every store clerk's sudden appearance when I entered an aisle. This wasn't new, it was merely another chapter in a book I hadn't chosen to write, and yet, knowing that didn't make it hurt any less. I paused in front of the freezer door, staring at the reflection of my own face in the glass. For a moment, I studied myself, the tired eyes, the straightened shoulders, the careful way I moved. I thought about how many times I had swallowed anger to survive moments like this. How many times dignity had to be protected like a fragile flame in a storm. Behind me. His reflection hovered too, a shadow in the glass. I told myself then, this will not break me. I grabbed a bag of frozen vegetables and placed it in the cart with deliberate calm. If he wanted a show, I would give him one, not of guilt, not of shame, but of composure. I would not let his suspicion become my cage. Still, I knew this wasn't over. Something in the air told me the tension would escalate, that this encounter would demand more of me than quiet endurance. And as I moved toward the checkout lanes, I braced myself because sometimes the shadow doesn't just follow you. Sometimes it steps directly into your path. The checkout lanes stretched before me like gateways bright with candy racks, tabloids shouting headlines, the soft beep of scanners, and the low chatter of clerks greeting customers. For most people, it was the ordinary end to an ordinary trip. For me, it felt like the final act of a play I hadn't auditioned for. My cart rolled forward, each wheel squeaking faintly, echoing the weight of everything that had built inside me. He was still there, of course he was, a few paces back, pretending to tidy a shelf stacked with gum and mints. But his eyes never strayed far. He was waiting, it seemed, for the moment of revelation, the moment he could prove what he already believed about me. I picked a line. The cashier was a young woman, no more than 19, with tired eyes and a nervous smile. She greeted the customer ahead of me with a chirp of, "Did you find everything okay?" I wondered what she saw when she looked at me. Would she see just another customer, or had the whispers already reached her? The line moved slowly, the conveyor belt creeping forward inch by inch. Each beep of the scanner seemed louder, sharper, puncturing the air. My chest tightened with the rhythm of it. I could feel my hands sweat against the cart handle, though I stood as tall as I could, willing myself not to shrink beneath the weight of invisible judgment. And then it happened. The employee stepped forward, closer now, no longer pretending to rearrange candy or straighten gum packs. He lingered at the corner of the lane, folding his arms across his chest, watching, waiting. His posture wasn't casual anymore. It was accusatory, as if this was the moment he had followed me for all along. The customer ahead of me bagged their items and left, oblivious to the storm brewing behind them. Now it was my turn. "Aye," the cashier said softly, forcing a smile. I nodded back. My voice caught somewhere between wanting to appear calm and wanting to shout. I began unloading my items onto the conveyor. The apples, the loaf of bread, the toothpaste, the milk, simple, ordinary things. But in that moment even, those objects seemed to carry a weight they shouldn't have evidence in a trial, where my guilt had already been decided. As the cashier scanned the first item, I noticed her glance over my shoulder. She saw him too. Her eyes flicked nervously between us, the tension unmistakable. And then, the words I had both expected and dreaded came. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, stepping fully into the lane. His voice was firm, rehearsed, the kind of tone employees use when they believe authority is on their side. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze. "Yes? Do you mind if I check your bag before you pay?" His question was phrased politely, but his tone carried no softness. It wasn't a request. It was an accusation dressed in the thin disguise of procedure. The cashier froze, her hand hovering above the scanner. The line behind me grew restless. People shifting, sighing, curious eyes darting forward to catch the spectacle. My throat tightened. A familiar shame clawed at me, hot and suffocating. The humiliation wasn't private anymore. It was public, displayed under the harsh buzz of fluorescent lights and the impatient gaze of strangers. I swallowed hard, steadying my voice. Why? I asked, my tone even. Just a routine check, he said, though his eyes betrayed the lie. No one else in line had been asked. No one else had been shadowed through the store. Routine? No, this was personal. This was prejudice. Behind me, someone muttered, "What's going on?" The question wasn't for me. It was for the audience this moment had gathered, the silent jury that had formed without invitation. I felt the storm inside me rising. Every lesson from my childhood, every warning, every whispered instruction collided with the urge to defend. Myself, I could hear my mother's voice. Stay calm. Don't give them a reason. Dignity is your shield. But I also heard the fire in my own chest. Enough. Enough of being quiet while suspicion drags you through the mud. I straightened my shoulders, my hand steady as I placed the last item on the conveyor. No, I said, clear and firm. You may not check my bag. I haven't paid yet. I haven't left the store, and I haven't done anything wrong. His jaw tightened. It's policy, he insisted, though I could see in his eyes it wasn't. Then show me where it's written. I countered, my voice louder now, carrying. Into the line of restless shoppers. The cashier's eyes widened. The people behind me shifted again, the air thick with discomfort. I could feel their stares digging into my back, waiting to see how this would unfold. The employee faltered, just slightly, his confidence cracking under the weight of being called out. He hadn't expected resistance. He had expected compliance, shame, silence, but silence is a luxury the humiliated can no longer afford. I leaned forward slightly, my voice lower but sharper. You followed me through this store like a shadow. Every aisle, every step, you didn't follow her. I gestured to the woman who had checked out before me, or anyone else in this line. Just me, so tell me, what exactly did you think I took? For the first time, his eyes flicked away, just for a second, but long enough to reveal the truth. He had nothing, no reason, no justification, just bias, laid bare under the unforgiving lights of the checkout lane. The silence stretched long enough to be uncomfortable. Then, from somewhere behind me, a voice rang out, "Let her shop in peace." It was firm, tired, frustrated. Another shopper had spoken, and once one voice broke the silence, another followed. "Yeah, this is ridiculous." The cashier looked from me to him, caught between her training and her conscience. Her voice was small, but it carried, "Sir, if you don't have cause, you can't hold up the line." His lips pressed into a thin line. The authority he thought he held had begun to crumble, slipping through his hands, and in that moment I felt something shift inside me. The humiliation hadn't disappeared, it never does, but dignity had risen to meet it. Courage, too, because sometimes the only way to protect your worth is to stand so tall that even suspicion can't reach your crown. I turned back to the cashier, my voice steady. "Please continue." She scanned the rest of my items quickly, her hands slightly shaky, but her eyes soft with something like solidarity. I paid, slid my card through the reader, and bagged my groceries with deliberate calm. Each movement was a declaration. I belong here. I am not what you assume. I will not shrink for your comfort. When I finished, I pushed my cart forward, the crowd parting around me. The employee stood there still, arms folded, his silence louder than words. He had tried to strip me of dignity, but instead he had revealed his own emptiness. As I walked toward the automatic doors, the hum of the lights faded, replaced by the soft whoosh of air as the doors opened. Outside, the sun was still shining, the world kept moving, but I carried with me a new weight, one that wasn't just about humiliation, but about the choice I had made not to let it break me. Because sometimes the most radical act of resistance is to walk forward, head unbowed, carrying your own dignity in both hands like something precious that no one else has the right to touch. The automatic doors slid open with their familiar whoosh, releasing me from the buzzing fluorescent cage into the brightness of the afternoon. The sun hit my skin like a balm, warm and unapologetic, as though it had been waiting to remind me that the world was bigger than the narrow aisle of humiliation I had just walked through. I pushed my cart forward, each step steady but heavy, like I was wading through water. My groceries rustled in their bags, ordinary items carrying the weight of an extraordinary ordeal. Bread, milk, apples, labels, toothpaste symbols now, reminders of what should have been a simple errand but had become a test of endurance. The parking lot stretched before me, cars glinting under the sun, people coming and going without the shadows I had endured. For them, this was just another day. For me, it was something else entirely. I reached my car, popped the trunk, and began unloading the bags. The small thunk of each item landing in the trunk was strangely grounding. Bread, thunk, milk, thunk, vegetables, thunk. Each sound echoed, like punctuation marks in a story I didn't want to tell but knew I couldn't forget. I closed the trunk gently and leaned against the car for a moment, letting the breeze brush across my face. My chest still tightened with the memory of his voice. "Do you mind if I check your bag?" Echoing like a broken record. The sting of it clung to me, sticky and unrelenting. I thought about driving away, leaving the store behind me, letting the automatic doors swallow the memory whole. But I couldn't, not this time, because the truth is, the story didn't end at checkout. The story lived on, lodged deep in my chest like a stone, and silence would only let it harden. So I stayed still, letting myself feel everything at once. The shame, the anger, the humiliation, but also the defiance that had risen in me when I said no. That one word had cracked something open not just in him, but in me. I replayed the scene in my mind, his faltering eyes, the murmurs of other customers, the cashier's nervous glance, the small but powerful voices that had spoken up from the line, "Let her shop in peace." That voice still echoed too, a reminder that sometimes dignity isn't carried alone. Sometimes it's held together by strangers who refuse to let injustice pass quietly. I straightened up, unlocking the driver's side door, but I didn't climb in right away. Instead, I pulled out my phone, staring at the dark screen for a long moment before it lit up. My reflection looked back at me, tired, yes, but also firm. My thumb hovered over the screen. Who do I call? Do I report this to the store manager? Do I post it online? Do I tell my family? My friends? Or do I bury it in silence? Another story folded into the countless others I've carried like scars. The choice felt heavy. Speaking out meant reliving it, exposing it, opening myself up to disbelief, dismissal, or worse, accusations that I was making it about race. But silence, it meant letting him win. It meant letting the shadow keep following, not just me, but anyone who looked like me. I thought of my younger cousins, the ones just beginning to navigate the world, bright and hopeful, but already carrying the lessons their parents whispered. Be careful, be polite, don't give them a reason. I thought about the world they would inherit. Would I let them walk into the same aisles, face the same shadows, without knowing someone before them had spoken? I couldn't, not anymore. I sat down in the driver's seat, the leather warm beneath me. My hands gripped the steering wheel, not to drive, but to steady myself. And then I spoke aloud to no one but the quiet air inside the car. "You will not silence me." The words felt like a vow. I opened my phone again, this time pressing the record button. My own voice filled the small space as I began to speak, steady at first, then stronger with each word. I told the story of what had just happened. The shadowing, the confrontation, the humiliation at the checkout. I described the way his eyes never left me, the way his words cut like knives hidden behind politeness. I spoke not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever felt the weight of suspicion pressing down on them for no reason other than the skin they wore. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from release. I stopped the recording and sat in silence for a moment, breathing deeply. The story was no longer locked inside me. It had voice now. It had life. But still, I wondered, would anyone believe me? Would they dismiss it as exaggeration, as sensitivity? Or would they hear the truth in the tremor of my voice? The truth carried not just by me, but by generations before me who had lived under the same gaze. The thought of disbelief stung, but it didn't stop me. Because silence was no longer an option. I placed my phone on the passenger seat and started the car. As I drove out of the parking lot, the store grew smaller in my rearview mirror, but the weight of it didn't shrink with the distance. It clung to me, etched into memory. I drove slowly, letting the hum of the road steady me. And in the quiet of that drive, I thought about dignity not as something given, but as something claimed, protected, guarded like treasure. Because the truth is, dignity is not fragile. It only feels that way when others try to strip it from you. But when you hold on to it, when you refuse to let it go, it becomes a shield stronger than any shadow. By the time I reached home, I had made my decision. This wasn't a story I would bury. This wasn't a moment I would let dissolve into silence. This was a story that needed to be told, not just for me, but for anyone who has ever felt the cold eyes of suspicion in a place where they should have been free. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat in the stillness of my driveway. The day had begun with a simple errand. It ended with something else entirely. A vow that my voice would not be quiet. A vow that humiliation would not define me? A vow that my dignity, once tested, would only burn brighter. And as I gathered my groceries and carried them inside, I knew this wasn't just the end of the story. It was the beginning of something larger, Doc, because sometimes the shadow doesn't follow you home. Sometimes you carry it into the light so everyone else can see it for what it truly is. That night, the house was quiet. The groceries were put away, the ordinary rhythm of life trying to reassert itself, but inside me, there was no return to normal. The store had followed me home, its shadow still clinging to my chest. I sat at the kitchen table, the glow of my phone screen lighting my face. The recording I'd made in the car still sat there, unshared, waiting like an unopened letter. My thumb hovered over the play button, but I hesitated. Reliving it was one thing. Letting others hear it was another, so I started small. I called my sister. Her voice, warm and steady, came through the line. "Hey, what's up?" she asked, casual, unaware of the storm I was about to drop into her evening. I hesitated, then exhaled. "Something happened at the store today." As I spoke, the silence on her end grew heavier. I told her everything, the eyes, the shadow, the confrontation at checkout. I could hear her breathing hard as though she was pacing. "Are you kidding me?" she finally said, anger sharp in her tone. "They followed you through the whole store? Asked to check your bag before you even paid?" "Yes," I said softly. "This is exactly why Mama drilled it into us, why she told us to keep our hands visible, why she told us to smile even when we didn't want to. This is what she was preparing us for." Her voice cracked, not just with anger, but with sadness. I stayed quiet, letting her words fill the space between us. "You can't stay silent," she said firmly. "Not this time. People need to know. That man needs to be held accountable." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I recorded myself telling the story," I admitted, "but I haven't shared it yet." "Share it," she urged. "Even if it's just with us at first. Don't carry this alone." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Her words had chipped away at my hesitation. The weight I carried didn't feel as heavy when spoken aloud, so I took the next step. I sent the recording to a close circle of friends, people who knew me well, people I trusted with my vulnerability. Within minutes, replies lit up my phone. "This is heartbreaking. I'm so angry for you. This has happened to me too. You're not alone. Say the word and we'll stand with you." Their responses came like waves, washing over the raw edges of my humiliation. It didn't erase what had happened, but it reminded me that my pain was not isolated. It was part of a larger story, one that stretched far beyond me. One friend called immediately. "Listen," she said, her voice steady with conviction. "You need to share this publicly. Not for sympathy, but for truth. Because every time we stay silent, they get to keep doing this. But when you speak, you shine a light on it. And light makes it harder for shadows to hide." Her words echoed in me long after the call ended. I opened my social media app and stared at the blank post screen. My fingers hovered, trembling. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every person who had ever walked into a store and been reduced to a stereotype. This was about refusing to let humiliation thrive in the dark. So I uploaded the recording. My voice filled the digital space, carrying my story beyond the walls of my kitchen. I hit post before I could second-guess myself for a moment. There was only silence. Then the responses began. First, a trickle of likes and comments. Then a flood. People I knew, people I didn't know, voices from near and far all weighing in. "I've been there. This happened to me just last month. Thank you for speaking out. This is why we can't stay quiet." Some comments carried outrage. Others carried sorrow. But most carried solidarity. The kind that stretches across miles and binds people together through shared struggle. Of course, not all responses were kind. A few doubted, dismissed, or deflected. Maybe he was just doing his job. "Are you sure it wasn't a misunderstanding? Not everything is about race." Those words stung, but they didn't silence me. Because for every voice of doubt, there were dozens saying, "We believe you. We stand with you." And in that chorus I found strength. The story began to spread. Shared from one feed to another, reaching people I never expected. Messages came from strangers, telling me their own stories of being followed, questioned, accused. Stories from black men, black women, even black children who had felt the sting of suspicion far too young. Each story was like a mirror, reflecting my own pain but also magnifying it into something undeniable. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern, a thread woven into the fabric of daily life for too many of us. I realized then that speaking out wasn't just about reclaiming my own dignity. It was about creating space for others to reclaim theirs too. The next day, my phone buzzed with a message from a community leader I knew through a local advocacy group. "I saw your post," she wrote. "Would you be willing to share your story at our upcoming forum on racial profiling?" My stomach tightened. Public speaking had never been easy for me, and this story was still so raw. But I also knew that silence silence had already stolen too much from me. Yes, I typed back before fear could change my mind. The ripple was growing. What began as humiliation in a checkout lane was now turning into testimony fuel for a conversation that stretched far beyond one store. One employee, one Saturday afternoon. As I sat with that realization, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, yes, hurt, absolutely, but also pride. Because I had taken what was meant to shame me and transformed it into something larger than myself. I thought again of my younger cousins, of the lessons my mother taught me, of the voices that had spoken up in the checkout line, and I knew that this story, painful as it was, carried within it a seed of change, not a solution, not yet, but a spark, and sparks, when shared, have a way of lighting fires. The day of the forum arrived faster than I expected. The invitation had sounded simple enough, a community gathering on racial profiling, a space for stories and solutions, but standing outside the venue, I felt the same knot in my stomach that I'd felt in that checkout lane. Vulnerability has a way of revisiting you. No matter how many times you think you've conquered it. The building was modest, a local community center with folding chairs set in neat rows and a small podium at the front. Flyers on the walls announced upcoming events, job fairs, tutoring programs, neighborhood meetings. This was a place where voices mattered, where stories were currency. As I stepped inside, I was greeted by the hum of conversation. People of all ages and backgrounds filled the seats, some holding notepads, others simply holding space with their presence. At the front, a banner stretched across the wall. Justice and dignity, a community conversation on racial profiling. The organizer, a woman I admired for her tireless advocacy, approached me with a warm smile. "I'm so glad you came," she said, squeezing my hand. Her touch was grounding, reminding me that I wasn't alone. When the program began, the room quieted. One by one, speakers shared their stories, moments of suspicion, humiliation, injustice. A man described being pulled over for no reason on his way home from work. A teenager recounted how store security accused him of stealing headphones he'd bought just minutes before. Each story was like a thread, weaving a fabric of collective truth that could no longer be ignored. And then, it was my turn. My legs felt heavy as I walked to the podium, the weight of dozens of eyes settling on me. I gripped the edges of the wood, steadying myself. For a moment, the words caught in my throat. But then I remembered the store, the shadow, the checkout line. I remembered the voice that had shouted, "Let her shop in peace," and I knew I had to speak. "My name is—" I began, my voice trembling slightly before finding its rhythm. "A week ago, I went to the store for something simple, groceries, nothing more. But instead of shopping in peace, I was followed, watched, treated as if my skin was a crime in progress." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Soft but affirming. I told them everything, the sensation of being shadowed, the confrontation at checkout, the humiliation of being asked to open a bag I hadn't even paid for. I spoke of the silence I carried home with me, the decision to record myself, the choice to share the story publicly. My words poured out, steady and unrelenting. Not just a recounting of events, but a testimony of what it feels like to have your dignity placed on trial over and over again. By the time I finished, the room was silent. Not the silence of indifference, but the silence of weight, of truth settling into bones. And then came the applause, loud, sustained, not just for me, but for everyone who had ever endured what I described. Afterward, people came up to me, one by one, sharing their own stories, thanking me for giving voice to what they had kept hidden. "I thought it was just me," a young woman whispered. "Hearing you say it out loud, it makes me feel less alone." Her words clung to me. That was the heart of it, breaking the isolation, shattering the lie that these moments are rare or personal. They are neither. They are systemic, and naming them is the first step toward dismantling them. Over the next few weeks, the ripple grew. Local media picked up the story, framing it within the larger conversation about racial profiling in retail spaces. Advocacy groups cited my experience as evidence in their push for stronger anti-discrimination policies. Even strangers reached out, sending messages of solidarity, of gratitude, of their own pain, finally finding language. Of course, there was pushback too. Some dismissed it, accused me of exaggerating, insisted I was imagining bias where none existed. But those voices, though loud, were drowned out by the chorus of lived experience that echoed my own. The store itself eventually issued a statement, carefully worded, polished an apology without really saying the word sorry. They promised retraining, new procedures, sensitivity workshops. Whether it would change anything, I couldn't say, but the point was no longer about them alone. It was about the conversation that had been sparked, the light that had been shone on a shadow too many of us knew well. One evening, I sat with my mother, telling her everything that had unfolded since that day. She listened quietly, her eyes thoughtful. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "When I taught you those lessons as a child about keeping your hands visible, about staying calm, I did it to protect you. But I also prayed for the day you wouldn't just survive these moments, but rise above them. You've done that." Her words filled me with a warmth I hadn't expected, a healing that reached deeper than the wound itself. I realized then that the story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever carried the same burden. And in sharing it, I had shifted the weight, not erasing it, but redistributing it, so no one had to hold it alone. Dignity, I understood now, is not something that can be taken permanently. It can be bruised, humiliated, tested, but when reclaimed, when spoken aloud, it becomes stronger. Like steel forged in fire, the memory of that day at the store will never vanish. I will always remember the shadow, the confrontation, the sting of suspicion. But I will also remember the courage it forced me to find, the community it connected me to, and the vow it etched into my spirit, a vow that I will not shrink, a vow that I will not be silent, a vow that I will carry my dignity unshaken into every space I enter, and maybe, just maybe, my story will help others do the same, because at the end of it all, the truth is simple. We deserve to shop in peace. We deserve to live in peace. We deserve dignity, not as a gift, not as a favor, but as a birthright, and no shadow, no matter how closely it follows, can take that away.